Welcome to choosing a build type. Now, no doubt this is going to be part one of a two-part video because I've got a fair amount of things I want to cover with you here, and I want to get out into some code and really show you how to use the build type and the compiler directives together. So the first thing, let's talk about these build types. Now, when you're building an application in Visual Studio, there's a lot of build options and settings that you can modify, and these are really found in three main locations in the Visual Studio interface. The first one is the configuration manager, and if you choose build on the main menu up there and then just choose configuration manager, you'll see it. Tools options, there's a projects and solutions section down there, and the general sections where you have a lot of your most prevalent settings that we'll talk about at this point. And the biggest one is we can determine where the build files will be placed. And then there's the project properties. And if we just go to the project item on the menu and go down to properties, it will expose some things to us. We can choose the build type, for example, whether we want an executable file, a .dll file, or a class file, if you will. And we can also work with compiler directives there. And we'll take a look at that as well. Now, the best way to understand build types and compiler directives and stuff is just to go out and look at some code. So let's go build some code, take a look at this, and see what it looks like. Now, we'll jump into Visual Studio, and notice, like all the other examples, I've created a project, a new project, a Windows Forms project, and I have entitled it Build Type Example. Okay, so we'll just click OK here, and we'll let our project build, and then I'm going to do my standard single form, one button on the form to kick off our code and to test it so that we can see what's going on. So there's my form. Let me go into Toolbox, drop my button on. I'll just double click that button and let it drop it. And first of all, before I write any code here, let's go over those three things. First of all, on the configuration manager, you'll notice right here on the toolbar, we can change the build type, debug or release, or we can jump into the configuration manager right here. We can also get to the configuration manager on this build menu choice right here, and we can come down to configuration manager. And when we open that up, we can determine what configuration we want to do, debug or release. We can build a new type, and we can call it beta. And with that, we can copy settings from release for now. And then notice we can choose beta, debug, or release. And we can work with compiler directives later to work with that. Now, let me show you one more thing right quick while we're here and while we're talking about this kind of stuff. If I go out here and right-click on the solution and add a new project, and I just take Windows Forms Application 1 and I add it in here, right here. Notice that if I go to Build and go to Configuration Manager, I can determine whether I want that Windows Form Application 1 included in the build on this or not, just by checking it or not checking it, okay? And so by unchecking, I can say when I build this, I don't include that, okay? And then I can just always go right back out here and remove that project from here quite easily. Okay, and so I'll just remove that, and we're right back to where we were. Okay, so now let's write some code. Oh, before I do that, let's go on and talk about some others. I about lost my train of thought there. Go to Tools, Options is another place we can make some settings with our program and with the build. Notice right down here is projects and solution. And if I go to general, there's my projects location. There's my project templates location. And then if I click on build and run, I can make some decisions about how things happen there. And then on project properties, if I go right up here to project and come down to notice I have the project name and properties, I can come right here and notice I can determine whether I want the output type to be a Windows application, a class library, which would be a DLL, and a console application if I would like. I can change the icon that I'm using for my application, and then notice down here on build, I can start to check these particular build and especially these compiler directive symbols and so forth. Okay, so I want you to notice that we have these define, debug, and trace things, and notice that's because I have beta on, and if I put it on debug, you'll see those are there. If I put it on release, you'll know that some other things change. And so all of these settings that I can change down through here are going to be based on the type of build that I want to do. And so I can very easily come in here and change the type of build that I want to do. All right, so let's go out and play with this just a moment and see what we can make happen here. Now, the first thing I want to do in my button click object, I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to do a message box to start off with, show, and I'm just going to say the click event has been called. And this will let us know that we're starting to work through our code now, and we're starting to process everything that's going on, right? And so when we execute this, and notice we're building in beta, I'll change that later. We're going to build this code, and when I click on the button, my click event has been called. All right, no big surprise there. Everything's cool. Everybody's happy, right? Now, let's talk about how we can use a processor directive, okay? Well, the first thing I want to show you here is using the debug processor directive and explain how the configuration manager works with that. But I'm going to stop right here at the end of part 1. Join me in part 2 and we'll dive right in right here and see how to use this.